Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 136 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. It is hot here in Los Angeles. We're at the beginning of a heat wave.
The beginning?
Well, we're in the middle of a heat wave, I guess, but I've heard that this is the beginning of a week-long heat wave. Yeah, it's going to get bad. So I think that in an effort to make sure we make it through this with air conditioners intact, we're going to make this a hot episode.
I'm looking at Kellen's face right now on the screen, and he is just beads of sweat are just dripping off his nose.
Oof, you want to wipe that off?
It's like the things that we do for these people, you know?
Right.
They used to put up with the drone of my refrigerator, but somehow now the quality demands are too high, you know, so we
must suffer for our art.
Yes.
Right, exactly.
The pain.
Air conditioners off, no background sound, everyone suffer for the next 1.5 hours.
Final destination, no items.
Yes, exactly. What we're going to do this episode is we're going to just be asking some hot questions. It seems appropriate for the heat. I prepared a few questions for my two cohorts, and they do not know what they are, so they're going to be coming in hot with those answers later in the episode. Before we get there, let's talk about the games that we've been playing. Mark.
Yes.
What have you been playing?
So I played either Control, which when I told Kellen I played it, he was thrown for the loop because there's another game called Control.
But we don't talk when it's not recording, though. So we're not actually friends. We just sort of, okay.
We're just coworkers.
Okay, so this is dramatic reenactment.
Yeah.
So what game did you play?
I played Control. Also
video game?
CT.
That came out like 3 years ago, and no one cares about it.
I played Control Part 2, CTRL. This is a new game by Pandasaurus, which I think is a Target exclusive. I'm not sure, but certainly can pick it up at Target. What drew me to this game, aside from its three-dimensional, very blocky, very colorful pastel presentation, but the thing that got me is that I've been looking for a game by Kramer and Kiesling, a nod to a game we're going to be talking about later, but Kramer and Kiesling made a game a while ago called Pueblo, which is out of print, super hard to find. But in Pueblo, what you do is you are building buildings, and at the end of the game, the way you score is you look at each side of the map, and depending on how many buildings you can see, that's how many points you score. So that is the conceit of Control. What you do in Control is there is a block that is passed between the players, and the block is 3x3. So there's 3x3 spots open on the block, and on your turn, you're placing 3 blocks of your color, and you're attaching it to the central block, sort of like Lego style. And when it comes back around to you, when you're placing your blocks, you can place them over opponent's blocks. So you sort of can cover them up. And you do this until you run out of blocks. And then the way you score is you look at every side of the block, except for the bottom. You don't have to worry about having this thing like not sitting on the table. You never place bricks in the bottom of the block. So you look at the 4 sides and the top, and for every block of your color that you see, you score a point. Scoring is super simple, and that's Control. Plays in about 20 minutes, super fast. I liked it. It's a game where, because it plays so quickly, it's hard to tell what kind of legs it's got, but because it's so fast and so easy to teach, if you're looking for a spatial game with like an interesting table presence, sort of like Gemblo, the Gemblo with like the sparkly bits, this has, you know, the big Lego blocks. Control was an interesting game. I'm eager to play it again and eger to play it with you guys.
I like the look of this. Every time I see pictures of it, it's just got, like you say, almost just that toy Lego feel to it. There's a specific 80s toy I'm trying to think of that I can't bring to mind right now, but it's just got
Lego.
That classic feel to it.
I think they're Legos you're talking
No, not Lego. And it's not Legos. No one in the world says Legos except America, by the way.
What do you guys say?
Lego blocks. Legos is not a accepted plural of the word Lego.
What do you call the waffles that are frozen at the supermarket?
Bad.
Lego my ego.
Ego. Yes, okay, sorry.
That's a terrible name for waffles if you think about it. Sounds gross.
Mark, is this game more of a Control S or Control X?
Wait, what's Control S again?
Save.
Oh, save, right. Yeah, it's a Control S.
Okay.
And then when you go to a birthday party, you can Control V it with somebody else.
But that would be piracy, probably.
Yeah, don't Control V your own copies of this.
That's right.
But my question, is this sort of one of those love in the time of COVID things where you're handing a 3x3 grid back and forth and then running it through your fingers?
Sure, right. Yeah, no, it's like you sanitize it per pass
turn.
pass the block, pass the sanitizer. It's like a pass sort of thing.
Right.
So it's just covered in it, kind of.
Right.
And then there's a dexterity component to the game.
Right. There's like, can you hold on to it amidst the hand sanitizer that is soaking it?
And that's airing out on your porch in the background right there. I can see it.
Exactly. Both the novelty and the ease of scoring is also a nice hook. Looking at all sides, but also it's just very, very easy to tell what the scoring is. That was something I was sort of a little worried about, but it's fun.
Tinker Toys. That's what I was thinking of.
Never heard of them, I don't think. Tinker Toys. No, don't know.
Okay, never mind.
Neil, what's that game with the guy who climbs?
Hang on Harvey? Yeah.
Hang
this
on,
is-
okay.
You can buy Tinker Toys at the same place you can buy Hang on Harvey.
I always like to be reminded about Hang On.
I'm going to find a copy of Hang on Harvey just to play with you guys.
There you go.
And have a great time.
I know Tinker Toys.
Oh, I do. I know them too. Yeah, okay, I know them.
I like Connects. We're better.
Oh, yeah, Connects is good too.
So that is Control by Pandasaurus Games, available at a Target near you.
I think we did not do a great job of conveying. I am actually extremely jealous that you have this and upset that I haven't gotten to play it. So I don't know if that came through with all the bitty bits.
We can play this in Maracaibo.
Well, I don't know that we're going to get all that hand sanitizer on
Right.
Maracaibo.
Yeah.
Actually, it could fix up its theme,
good.
perhaps.
Wow, sanitize it. I like it. Let's move into a event that happened this weekend. We were all part of the Camp Capstone stream. So Capstone were hosting a little virtual con, if you will, where they were previewing and demoing some of their new and upcoming games. So we were fortunate enough to be on some of their live streams. Some of us less fortunate than others. At 7 a.m. in the morning, Mark and Callan.
Suffer for your art. It's the theme of this episode.
We'll come back to what Callan and Mark played in a little bit, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what I played, which was New York Zoo. This is a new tile laying game by the king of tile laying games, Mr. Uwe Rosenberg. This is a beautiful, colorful zoo-themed veneer to the traditional tile laying setup. So where his games have had kind of like, I would say, muddy, not as particularly exciting or vibrant themes, New York Zoo really looks pretty. The basic principle is a sort of a rondelle where you will have a marker that you can move up to 4 spaces around the track, triggering one of 2 different action types. So you're either going to be taking an enclosure, which is a little polyomino piece that you would put into your zoo, or you'll be taking new animals to put into those enclosures. There are also little spots on the rondelle where if you pass them, they will trigger breeding phases. So this is a little bit of a hybrid of both tile laying games like Patchwork and animal breeding games like Agricola. So it's an interesting setup that you wouldn't think would work together, but it surprisingly does. So once you pass one of those breeding spots, any of your enclosures that have 2 or more animals, as in a game like Agricola, will now get another animal added to them. The reason you're doing this is when one of those enclosures fill up, you get access to these attraction tiles, which are just like free little polyominoes that you can add to your park. And there are a limited supply of them, and they have only a few in very large sizes. So there's a little bit of a race to fill up your enclosure before other people do. So in the game I had, for example, I was the first person to fill up my enclosure. So I was the first person to get access to the only 8 filling space polyomino tile. So what's actually interesting about this is that there is this tension between wanting just to add enclosures to your park and wanting to get animals so that they can breed so that you can get free attractions. And it's never super apparent what the best course of action is. You kind of want to time picking up the animals so that as you pass the breeding spaces, you're going to maximally benefit of them. But it might just behoove you just to go straight into tile laying. The aim of the game is just to fill up your board. So it is just a strict race. So what could have happened in my game, which incidentally I didn't win, but I was doing really well on just filling my grid with pieces without leaving any gaps. So I didn't need that many attractions. So something I discovered too late was I could have just pushed towards just getting enclosures, not worrying so much about the animals in them and just filling my board. But you kind of feel like you're missing out if the marker is passing all of these breeding spots without your animals breeding. So it's a very simple premise. That's basically the gist of all the rules, to be quite honest. It looks really, really good. And my quick hot take is that this is one of my new favorites in this genre. Like, it's a very simple rule set. It's Baron Park with a little bit more to it, but it's just quick and fast. And it being a pure race game without you having to tally all your victory points at the end of the game just feels exactly what you want from this sort of speedy game.
All right, Neelan, let's start with the questions.
Yeah.
All right. So my first question is about sex.
Yes.
So
You come to the expert.
in Agricola, when you have one cow, the sex happens and you don't get a baby cow. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
Then you have two cows, the sex happens, you get a baby cow.
Yep.
I get that. Then when you have four cows, the sex happens and you only get one baby cow.
Uh-huh.
I don't get it, Mr. Uwe. How does it work in New York Zoo? I just like to know if it's more thematic in that way.
No, it works the same way in New York Zoo. And as I understand in the rule book, two of them are breed and the other two watch. So that's the setup.
Wow. It's a kinkier game than I expected. So let me ask you, in terms of different strategies being successful, you mentioned that you, in retrospect, might have gone for just like a fill up the
Yeah.
park with enclosures. Do you think different strategies are viable? Like, do you have a sense that not going enclosures might also work, that going animal heavy might work too?
I do think that, specifically because of the guy who won the game ended up doing that by sort of just triggering enough breeding to like get enough small attractions to fill up little small gaps he'd left throughout his
Okay.
board. So he had little one spaces here that were like very inefficient, which led me to believe I was actually a shoe-in to win at some point because I was like, I'm just filling this up really, really well. But the mistake I made was getting too hung up on the idea of wanting to fill my enclosures with animals because the pieces that you can just grab from the rondel aren't small pieces, right? So you can't just fill those spaces with them. The only way to fill them is with the attractions by filling up enclosures. So I didn't have to be in that position. I could have just continued to fill my grid efficiently with enclosure pieces and then just plugged a couple of maybe one or two gaps I had at the end. And I think I probably would have done a lot better had I done that.
I see.
What's actually quite neat about it is that, I mean, even just in the breeding alone, there's a couple of trade-offs that didn't really play into our first game of it, but every time the breeding phase happens, you can technically breed that animal in two different enclosures, so you could be getting two different animals instead of one if
There you
were,
go,
like,
Kellen.
spreading them out. So there's a little bit
My
of,
eyes lit up there with the talk of breeding.
it becomes this decision of do I want to concentrate my animals in one enclosure, spread them across multiple enclosures, or diversify to lots of different types of animals so that I trigger the breeding more often. There's more there going on than you'd think for what is a very simple game. I dug it.
That's cool. I'm looking at the production by Capstone, and it's going to come with 127 wooden animals.
Right. And yeah, from what I could tell from Tabletop Simulator, they're just these little tiny, adorable little meeples.
Cool.
Quite into it.
And if you go for penguins and I go for flamingos, does it matter what Mark goes for?
So one of the things I was trying to figure out was how much of that, like, competing for a specific animal matters. It doesn't really seem to because there's no like limit on the animals per se. I guess the only thing is that, you know, if you're leading up to like a penguin breeding, for example, there's only a few spots on the way there that you can pick up penguins. So you probably don't want to all be competing for the same one, just in terms of the timing. Like you're never going to run out of penguins, but you won't be able to get them as much as you might want. That could matter.
But don't you also want to sort of like ride somebody else's coattails? Because whenever a breeding occurs, they occur for everybody. It's not-
Exactly. So if
Yeah.
someone's pushing for penguin breeding to happen frequently, then you want to be coasting on that as well.
Yeah.
And what about it makes it New York instead of zoo?
Oh, you should have played this one, Kellen. You could have figured that part out.
Yeah, I
Well, I haven't played it yet. What I want to know what Nealon thinks.
think it was strictly their accents, from what I could tell.
What do you know about New York?
What do I know about New York? It's the Big Apple. I'm walking here. Did I do that right?
You did it perfectly.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I'm looking at the back of the box here, the capstone thing, and one of the kangaroos does have a slice of pizza in his paw. So he's got
does?
one in his paw and one in his pouch.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
So
Thematic.
Thematic.
it's authentic.
Yeah.
That is New York Zoo by Capstone Games and Uwe Rosenberg. Kellen, tell us about the other Capstone game.
Just to help you a little with your hosting duties, we will post links to the YouTube replays of these in the episode description so you can watch us do good. Nealon let down Board Game Barrage by not winning his game.
I was wrong.
Where Mark and I
was
in our
going to
game
say,
of
like,
Nature.
you called me out for not having a 100% win rate. Like, you contributed to the 100% win rate, Kellen?
I think there was a first and a second place in Renature. So we last week incorrectly called this game Renature.
You know what? I think Renature sounds better than Renature, honestly.
Well, Renature is a real word, Mark.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. We looked it up.
Okay.
And speaking of pronunciation, we did get some help on our Discord because Mark mispronounces things up and downtown New York. And in this case, he mispronounced the all-new hot male version of Hanami Koji. And we will now play how Mark should have pronounced Jixian Academy.
I pronounce it Jixie Academy. The right way to say it is
稷下 Academy.
Thank you for correcting Mark and taking up that noble banner from me. So we've got to get this episode back on track because it is getting sweltering in here.
Uh-huh.
Mark and I played this morning a game of Renature by Capstone Games, and this is from Kramer and Kiesling, who are famous for other games such as... I'm pointing at Neelan.
Mexica,
Oh, I'm pointing at Mark.
Tikal, Palaces of Carrera,
Maharaja.
Kavam.
Is that the one?
Yeah,
you guys just
Maharaja,
saved me a couple Google searches. Thank you.
Pueblo.
Don't even get me started on Pueblo. I had so many jokes, but I had to stop, I had to pick the best for your control segment. So Renature is a very, very simple game of domino placement. So you have dominoes that have 10 different animals on them, one on each side in the traditional just domino fashion, and a board of places to play area control. So as you place dominoes onto the board, you are surrounding these places to plant plants. And when you place a domino, you are then allowed to place a plant in an adjacent plot of land. And those plots of land are 2 squares big, are 3 squares big, are 5 squares big, are 7 squares big, and you're playing an area control game with those plots of land. In the event that there's only 2 spaces, it's probably 2 victory points to the person who has the best plants in there, and 1 victory point to the person who has the second most plants in there. This is very simple, but it sort of twists in a lot of fun ways. A couple of the ways that it twists that are fun, everyone has 4 types of plants. Bushes, big bushes, Christmas trees, and trees.
Yeah.
And those are 1, 2, 3, and 4 points. You also have neutral bushes, big bushes, Christmas trees, and trees that you can place when you place a domino. And when an area control plot of land scores, you kick out all pieces that are tied. So if Mark has 2 in an area control battle, it's 2, 3, 2, and 1. The 2 2s are kicked out, and the player who has 1 actually will score the second place score. So there is a lot of hate placement of neutral trees, which is really, really fun and really, really interesting. In addition to that, when you place the dominoes, if you enclose a plot of land, you actually get to trigger the scoring there, and you get some victory points from the backside of that scoring tile. The last system in the game, this is a very simple game, and I don't normally explain all of the systems, but they're so small, is a set of clouds that allow you to change things. If you spend 3 clouds, you get to take another turn. If you spend 2 clouds, you can change the wild animal. I liked it best when the owls were wild in our game of Renature. And these are sort of those modifiers where if you don't use them, you just get victory points at the end of the game for those clouds, but you may need them at the end of the game because you only take 12 turns, right? You have 12 dominoes, and each turn is critically important as you're fighting in this area control game. Mark, what did you think of Renature?
I liked it. I liked it a lot. Some of the people on our Discord were watching the game, and they asked me what I thought of it compared to another game that sort of feels similar, Blue Lagoon. Both games are sort of like route building in a way, although the route building in Blue Lagoon is much more free form, whereas you're much more restricted in the way you're laying the dominoes in Renature. And I still think that I prefer Blue Lagoon to Renature, but it's got that similar sort of like cut your opponents off, take aggressive moves, place things in a way that sort of you win tempo. It wasn't so much the case, I think, in the 4-player game we played, but I can see in a 2 or 3-player game, the way you place and the timing of placing dominoes could be much more impactful, because there are times where you really want to place a tree on a spot, but in order to place a domino in a place that will allow you to access that spot, you have to make sure like the timing is right as well. So I like that sort of tempo consideration. It's not as strong as the tempo considerations in Blue Lagoon, but I think the biggest thing is the simplicity of the rule set. Blue Lagoon has a lot of like things about scoring and, playing 2 phases, and you pick up sets of these and you pick up the most of these. So there's a lot of things to consider Blue Lagoon. This is much more pared down in terms of the way it plays, I think.
Yeah, that's a weird comparison for me, and it's fun to think about, but I don't really think they're as similar as they may appear from like a mechanisms perspective. There's a lot of really micro tactical decisions in this game that I think are just fantastic. You lay down a domino, and it's not just should I put this plant in plot A or plot B? It's also, you have multiple options within plot B, and one is more or less accessible than others. And so you may want to leave a spot open for someone else to come in and screw up your opponent's plans, or you may be just trying to make sure that you get that plot of land. It has the thing where near the end of the game, there are plots of land that no one has gotten to. And so if you can just get one thing in there, you're going to get extra value. And I love trying to twist for that near the end of the game. I think that the domino system makes the game incredibly tactical. And then the ability for a player to take a second turn by virtue of just spending victory points or spending cloud points to take another turn, there is a ton of change that will happen to the board by the end of the game. And your last few turns, you're really, really, really at the mercy of how nature has put the animals out. You don't want the gecko, but he's there in the corner and that's all you got. And so either you got to change the wild to do that, or you may have a turn that you don't even get to play. Mark did an amazing job in our game capitalizing in the mid game, twisting up when he saw scoring opportunities, and was able to hold on to that lead through the end of the game, even though it hurt his late game because he took 2 less turns than everyone. It's crazy how quick this went. It was an hour long. I'm really excited to get a hold of a physical copy of this just to have the dominoes. And I don't know what the components are made of, but I was very impressed. Definitely will want a copy for myself because I just think that the level of feistiness that the 4 of us will have makes a game like Renature sing, in the words of Neelan. It's feisty and over the top and filler length, but feels just, it's good. It's just a good game.
Yeah. You can see the Kramer and Kiesling pedigree for sure. It's like when you play Knizia games, like you know that this is designed by a designer that knows their stuff.
Knows Pueblos.
That's right.
So one quick question I have. I unfortunately missed the first bit of the rule, so I was mostly following along as you guys were playing it, but wasn't entirely sure about all of it. But with the domino placement, so one thing I noticed came up is that there's only one of each type of exact configuration of domino. Did you find that there was like a situation or often where you kind of were sitting on what seemed like a really strong move, but you just don't have the dominoes for it? So how effectively does the cloud system like mitigate that?
So that's one sort of interesting thing about the game in the early stages versus the game in the late stages, because toward the end of the game, your ability to sort of manipulate where you can place dominoes is restricted because you always have the get out of jail free thing of using 2 cloud tokens to change the wild animal. And so towards the end of the game, you're running low on cloud tokens, or you want to save them for a double move or whatever. So that was where my game sort of hinged, because I took those double turns in the mid game, and then that was what allowed me to win. But I was also worried because the higher scoring plots of land are only accessible at the end of the game. So there's a trade-off of like, do I want to score right now a bunch of points, or do I want to hold off until the late game and try to get into that late plot of land? But by the end of the game, the paths that you can follow to access those high-scoring plots, again, you're sort of like left to whatever is available. Like there may only be like a gecko and an owl, and if you don't have them, you're sort of out of luck. Whereas, earlier in the game, there's a bunch of different branches, and you somewhat have more options about where you're going to place things.
Okay, so the cloud system feels a little bit like, do I take this opportunity now and capitalize on it, or give myself more wiggle room later, potentially?
Yeah, there's some of that.
Cool.
I think you're tapping on the right part of the game, right? Because it's the one that gives me the most question marks of, like, is this the get out of jail free? In Tang Garden, I talked about how they use a similar system to essentially make up for their own randomness, right?
Right.
And here in this game, the last 2 turns, the girl who was playing with us just had to skip her turn, right? Because the wild changed, I believe, on the turn before. And so she had been banking on the wild being one thing, and then when that went away, she had no opportunities. I would say in the early game, I had 3 or 4 turns where Mark took the location that I wanted to take, like the move before me, and it just felt like a ton of interesting options. Which do I take? By the last 2 turns, it was where can I place to score anything, which is an interesting arc and not always my favorite. A little bit of a fizzle down at the end of like just grab 1 or 2 points as opposed to big explosions. But I think you could set up for a good end run if you had a strong amount of clouds near the end of the game, if you were kind of planning for that. And I think that I will say strategy executed perfectly, Mark, with the sort of the 1-2 first second, 100% board game barrage
I'm glad
win
we
rate
talked about that before the game, yeah.
until
And thanks for
Neelan.
letting me win
I
that
came
one.
in second as well, so I did just as well as Callan. So,
Well,
yeah.
I think that's one interpretation of the data.
I do like the trade-off of you could score big points late in the game, but you sort of have to make sure you have your options open because it forces you to consider the middle game. I think in a lot of times games like this, like you have to be geared toward the end game or you're not going to win. This allows you to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to sacrifice the end game by taking an opportunity in the mid game. I think a lot of games like force that crescendo, and this allows you to play differently, I think.
It's also so short, right?
Yeah.
We got through a live playing in front of people game on Tabletopia in just over an hour. I would guess that in real life, when you can hold the dominoes and you're not trying to jam them in there, it would go even better. And that is Renature by Kramer and Kiesling, and that is releasing this year from Capstone Games.
So before we get to our featured topic, just a couple of things that we would love to throw your way. Mark, I believe something else is kicking off in the Discord this week.
You would think that 3 math trades in 3 months would have been enough to satisfy the folks over there, but they demanded another one. So we are doing a 4th math trade. This time it's going to be on the OLWLG format. I'm going to be working on putting up a video by the time you hear this, explaining how that works. But for people who are familiar with OLWLG or don't like Apecorn or whatever, you can check out our math trade at boardgamebarrage.com/trade, and that will take you to the latest math trade.
I wonder how people are going to take to it, because my reaction was that after using Algae exclusively, like Apecorn felt weird and in a way that I didn't love, but I can see going the other way around being a lot worse, actually.
I'm very curious about that, so we'll see.
This feels like the long con, Mark, where you made a board game podcast so that you could run these trades.
You know what? I have a bunch of boxes that I haven't opened from the previous ones, and I've already forgotten what's in there. So, like, I love being in that spot. Like, having all these boxes of games, I can't even remember what's in there. So it's like, I'll have another Christmas when I open up.
One of my favorite memories was us all opening Mark's math trade boxes, not knowing what would be inside.
Yeah. I literally have forgotten 95% of the games in there.
That was disgusting displays of capitalism.
Okay, let's get into our feature topic, which is, how's everyone doing, by the way, heat-wise? Keeping in there? Kellen, you're more water than man at this point.
Well, I'd like to go get some more water, but we don't stop. You know what I'm saying?
We can't stop. I'm looking at Neelan's glass of scotch on the rocks.
Yeah.
And, the rocks have completely melted. His weekly glass of,
Right.
of booze.
Boozy Neelan.
What's that?
We don't like to talk about it because he has a problem
Right.
with
Well, I appreciate you not bringing it up, but but let's get into the hot questions. So the first hot question, there we go,
Perfect.
is the following. So we've been talking in the Discord about the nature of our top 50 lists and what favorite games mean to us. So quick question to you guys. Can a game be your favorite game if you don't play it that much anymore or don't want to play it that much anymore? Like, if a game has been in your top 50 list for a long time, but it's been a while since you've played it, is it still your favorite game?
I think that it cannot be a favorite game of yours if you do not want to play it. I think the wanting to play it is crucial. The opportunity may or may not be there because of whatever reason, like it may be a heavy game and you may need somebody who wants to play for a long time or whatever. But all of that, though, with one exception. And I think this is like the one weird area that makes ranking games difficult, which is like if it was like a game that you have maybe played out or maybe was a one-time experience like a Pandemic Legacy or something like a Legacy sort of game, that's a sort of gray area. I feel like a game that you have played out should suffer in your ratings because you don't want to play it as much anymore, but you can also, I think, give it a nod because you used to like it a lot. Like, One Night Ultimate Werewolf is a game that I don't want to play so much anymore, but I do still hold it in high regard because of the experiences it gave me in the past.
So you're saying that a game can be in your top 50 even though you don't play it, provided that you want to do it? So is this like a philosophical way of saying like it's not the destination but the goal that matters?
I will bypass the philosophical part because I'm not sure how to answer that, but I will say that I think intent is key. I really am a fan of BGG's ranking methodology where it's like it's based on for a lot of it, it's based on like I would play it all the time as like a 10 basically. And they have things about like this game is not even a game and it's like a 1 or 2, but like the idea that the desire to play it plays a massive part in how you rank it or how you rate it, I think is important.
Yeah, I want to bounce off what you just said because it was something that was very prevalent to like when I was thinking about this the other day was Kellen and I were talking about the resistance and kind of like how a game that I've played that much, do I still necessarily have the thrill, the desire to want to play it as much anymore? And the thing I said to Kellen, just almost without thinking about the BGG ranking system, was I would never turn down a game of it. And according to BGG's ranking system, like the way they specify that, that's a 10 in their system. And that's how I think about it. Like, even if I don't have the opportunity to play the Resistance live anymore, a large predominance of my games have been online with friends overseas, I would never, ever say no to anyone saying, let's play the Resistance. Even if we had just played it 5 times in a row, I would be, yes, we're playing it again right now. And that's why it's one of my favorite games. It's just that it's that excitement to want to play it despite maybe lack of opportunity.
If it's not about the love of the game, what is it about? Right, Kellen?
Well, there's a couple things here, right?
Okay.
So on one level, there's the want to play it again. And then I guess underneath that, there would be sort of the legacy of that game for you, which you mentioned. And then number 3 is sort of the as objective, quote unquote, subjective, we can do the quality barometer, right? Which is like, I would have KFC, 2 nights a week if I could, and I want it. My want is not lacking, Mark, but I know objectively that it's not 10 out of 10 fine dining. It's the hot chicken is not Howlin' Ray's LA famous good, but that doesn't stop my want.
All right, I have one very big question for you. How long would it take you to get that KFC twice a week? How much time are you spending en route to and from?
Not very long, Mark.
No, I get that. But on the other hand, I would say that I think that I have a number of games that I think are solid games, like well-designed games, even good as objectively as you can get, that I would rate low because I just don't enjoy them. I don't have a desire to play them.
Yeah, so even though the Splatterspellin games are all 10 out of 10s, this one is still a 5 out of 10 because I don't want to play it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I can get behind that that was sort of the third of my 3-part plan here that I can't remember the first 2 parts now. But legacy, want, legacy, and then quality. So moving back up to legacy, I know Neelan and I had this discussion. I think Cosmic Encounter is the best example for me where I have not played it because you idiots don't like it. I haven't had a good game of it in a number of years, but that doesn't change the fact that I had so many great games of it, or that it's very formative in how I interpret board games in general, right? A lot of games are compared to Cosmic for me, and then I look at like Dune and how Dune intersects with Cosmic Encounter and how that reflects what's happening in board gaming in 2019 and 2020, and they re-released that, and how is that perceived in the marketplace? And so there's this like when you say, well, what are the best games? It's a hard question to answer, I guess. And someone posted their top 25 games on a Geek List this week, and they use Pub Meeple to get to it. And like when you do Pub Meeple versus when you just say, make a list of your top 50 games of all time, for me, those aren't always the same. It's not the same list, and I don't know how to articulate it otherwise, but it is just something interesting to think about. I think the net and where I went with Neelan is that I think that the Resistance, for me, and not for Neelan, has a shelf life, and the more I play it, the less I will want to play it in the future, just based on how the meta, based on how those things go for me. But that doesn't make it not amazing. And then, you can layer on maybe the 4th part of the 3-part plan, which is that we as, the preeminent board game critics of the world are also advising new people. And so even though One Night Ultimate Werewolf has been played 1,000 times, and I would not play it again, it is still, in fact, a top 5 social deduction game. And so that's all sort of layered into it in a way that I think makes it an interesting, hot question.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. But I think that one of the things I liked about what you had described about like evaluating from 3 different perspectives is something I think that's actually going to sit with me a lot when we're talking about our top 50s, however we decide to do that this year. Because I've always had this debate with a game like Alhambra and stuff like Dominion, which, games that I've not only have not played in a very, very long time, but again, don't think I would They're still excellent games. Like Alhambra is still an excellent game. Would I in 2020 recommend anyone play Alhambra? Maybe not. Would I necessarily want to play Alhambra over like any other 50 games on my list? Maybe not. So like maybe it's time for a game like that, which I think is somewhere around the middle of my list, to slip off entirely. And it is an interesting question because I do kind of feel like there is this weird disingenuousness of a game like completely sliding off your list from like a high position from one year to the next. But maybe it's not as crazy as I'm thinking it is in my head.
It feels related to me to the, like, I'm going to keep this Haba game for my future child when
Right.
they turn 8 years old, even though, like, I don't even have a child's, twinkle in my eye, or as they say. It's almost like I don't know that anyone needs more than 50 games, like, at all, and that, like, playing beyond that space is like just a matter of excess, or that like they say a human can only have like 100 connections or whatever, where it loses all meaning. And it's like, well, if that's humans, like how many bits of cardboard boxes can we even know? Mark?
Right. I'm going to strongly disagree to that supposition.
Well, that's just your opinion, man.
I would also say that people should play Alhambra, definitely, because Alhambra
It's
is
still a great
fantastic
game.
Yeah.
It's so boring. Why would
You don't like
why
Alhambra?
would you recommend
I
that?
love vanilla Alhambra.
Yeah.
I think it's such a good game. What you said is exactly like where I struggle with ranking games. Like I really don't have a problem ranking games. I think it's fun. I love making lists. Like it doesn't stress me out at all. But the one thing about ranking games that is difficult is the one at Ultimate Werewolf is like this game that I've played a bunch.
The philosophical problem.
The philosophical problem, right? Yes. When it comes to desire, I'm good. But when it comes to philosophy, I fall down.
And that's why you befriended.
A philosopher.
Yeah. I never said I was a role model.
Who said that?
Natalie Portman.
No, my God, Charles Barkley. Come on.
Oh,
So you're so
I've been
bad at
waiting.
basketball players.
I've been waiting for like a month to say that. I haven't written down.
You've been holding this Natalie Portman Charles Barkley joke for a month.
Oh wait, did someone else say it?
Charles
oh,
Barkley.
Oh yeah, I don't know who that is.
Oh my God.
The singer, right?
Yeah,
Oh my God.
that makes me crazy.
All right. We need to
I'm
move
quoting Natalie Portman from her SNL skit. Okay,
on. Okay. Not
thank
familiar.
you.
Okay, so the next little question I had, and this one's a little bit sillier.
A little question? I thought at the beginning you said hot episode.
I
sounds
look,
like
I
that.
said it
You're
badly,
asking-
but I didn't say it that badly. Let's be clear. This is it's a hot question.
Like it. Love it. Love it.
This is, what is the one theme that you would pick for every game that you have to play? If every game you played from now on had to be one theme, what would it be?
Monks.
Oh, God.
Okay. My answer, I don't know if this counts. Tell me if it doesn't, because then I'll figure something else out. But it would be historical.
Ooh,
Is that
no,
cheap?
that's
cheat.
too
Okay.
big.
Okay. All right. Then,
Cheater.
Kellen, say Pokemon, and then I'll think about it while you say Pokemon.
Oh, that would be cool. It would just limit the. I'm always so worried. It's like I take these games that have generic themes like numbers and colors, and then I make them Pokemon, and then 12 and under people are excited to play with me. So I've like reduced the audience where normally a re-theme, goes the other way. I know what Mr. Pfister would say to this theme question, but
Taking shots.
for me and myself, I honestly, I think I would have to choose probably, and because I'm being forced to choose at gunpoint by your baby hot question, it would probably be generic fantasy. And I know that's a boring answer.
Yep.
I find that my taste with science fiction is a little bit more specific. And when the true tryhards of sci-fi come out and, it's about the hard, a teleporter does this and faster than light is that, like, I'm just like, I don't care. Please leave me alone. Generic fantasy, I can sub in my head hero journey, adventure, and ignore the orcs and the elves and the pointy whatever. And
Elves.
if I had to, generic fantasy, but only because you're making me.
Okay, I've got
Go
one
for it,
now.
Mark.
I think for me, I would go for like espionage spy.
Oh, that's good.
I like games that are geared towards
Yeah,
that.
and there's not enough of them.
Yeah, and I like the games that sort of come out of that theme, like the secret information
Yeah.
sort of things.
Does that? No, this doesn't really get into like coin, really, right?
There's a little bit. There's the idea of like espionage
Yeah.
and coin games. A little bit.
No, that's a good one, I think. I think, yeah, like I said, there's not enough games that like lean into that. I remember thinking when I was playing Sabotage. So this is a game where you're like spies versus like supervillains, basically. And it's a dumb theme, but it's kind of adjacent to the sort of thing you're describing. And it doesn't get used enough. Like there's a lot of life and vibrancy that just comes for free with like the James Bond spy super gadget type thing.
It's like I'm getting made fun of for making everything Pokemon, and he's bringing up, the Italian job, and like somehow that's more adult than what I said.
Which was elves and warlocks.
Stop talking. Neelan, what's your answer?
I mean, mine's only slightly less boring than Kellen's, which I think would be generic sci-fi.
Oh, there it is.
Oh my God.
I was actually struggling between the two. I was going to say generic fantasy or sci-fi as well. And I think for me, generic fantasy tends to devolve into D&D fantasy more often than not, which is just like, it's just the most boring version of that. Like if we start approaching like the almost more anime fantasy aesthetic, that's kind of more my vibe, but that's like,
Oh, yeah, boy.
but that's like, yeah, that happens, that happens less. I feel like you're more likely to get more interesting art, more interesting kind of novel experiences out of sci-fi. Like I think about stuff like Saul, which is an interesting sci-fi theme, despite being super generic on the surface. Like, I feel like there's potentially more variety there.
Fantasy for me feels like such a turnoff nowadays. I don't know why. Like, it's not as bad for me as steampunk, but it's close. Like, whenever I start seeing swords and like goblins and like shields, I'm part of me checks out.
You're
Like,
not a hero.
I'm a spy.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Mark. It's like there's a specific aesthetic, which is swords and goblins and orcs and elves and dwarves, where I'm just like, less so.
Like, how interesting could this game be? That's my immediate thought.
Right.
All right, Mark. You think the answer to this question
Mr.
is generic
Spy-Man?
spy? Is generic spy game?
Yeah.
All right. So describe to us, with your infinite wisdom and this
Got it.
hot question about Wingspan, the spy game.
Okay. Wingspan, the spy game. So it would take a lot. You'd have to change a lot. But see, the thing about Wingspan is I think actually the idea behind Wingspan would work quite a bit in a spy theme, because the appeal of Wingspan, the contents of Wingspan, is like the amount of different birds and like the illustration of the bird, and like it's almost like having a game with a lot of items in a way. Like, you're going through all these different, you got a canary, you got this, you got a jaybird, you got all this kind of thing.
Oh, you got 2 birds in your list of yada, yada, yada. You got to 2.
Seagull, pigeon. You want me to keep going?
These
I'll
are
go
all
with
birds.
all day. That's right. Owl. I had a whole bunch of owls I even touch on. Anyway, but so imagine Wingspan, but instead of Wingspan, you call it...
Wing Spy.
How could you work this? Wing Spy! Okay, yeah, that's not going to work really for this thing, but it worked. I like it. I accept it. But instead of like having a bunch of birds, you could have like a bunch of weapons,
Bombs.
maybe, or missions or something. And like,
Yeah.
so it'd be like a James Bondy thing where you could have a big stack of like weapons and figure out how
Napalm.
to do the missions. A-bomb,
Thermite.
yeah. Did you say thermite? Is that
Yeah.
from Star Wars? What's thermite
No.
from?
There
Is that a thing?
I don't know.
a thing.
I thought it was from Star Wars. But yeah,
It's
see,
in
you
Call
could
of Duty.
Oh, it is? Okay, there you go. So see, yeah, Wingspan, definitely.
Yeah. And you think that would be as successful as the bird game that they made?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
James Bond has been a franchise for tens of years.
All right.
Yeah, Wing Spy.
You gave it the old college try.
Uh-huh.
Nealon gets 10% of all proceeds for the Wing
Or
Spy
Wing
name.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing I'm learning from all of this is as the preeminent voices in board gaming, we need the medieval fantasy spy sci-fi hybrid game to bring all of these grand ideas together. Like, as people on the pulse of gaming, just take what we've given you. Just take it. It's yours.
Watch out, Gloomhaven.
Exactly.
Gloom Spy.
Wing
Spy Haven.
Spy is coming. And that is going to do it.
Spirit Island.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
Pandemic Lego Spy.
This isn't even the outro. What are you guys doing?
That's going to do it for this week's episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. Thank you all for listening. As always, you can check us out on our social media. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Discord. We have a very active Discord where some math trading is happening. We're talking board games all the time. That is at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Just hang out with us. Lots of fun topics to talk about there.
Wrap it up. It's hot.
Okay. Thank you very much to Hot Society for intro and outro music. What's in your mind, kid? That's going to do it. Goodbye.
Bye.
Spyth.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh my gosh. We're stopping the recording, Mark. We're stopping it.
Marakai Spy?
Okay.
That's a sing-song quality.
Give
So, first. Oh my god. I hate that.
It's been a long time.
It's been too long. Wait, I can do it again. I can do it better.
Yeah. It wasn't that bad. I thought
It just like cold in my throat.
You have high
or wet.
standards. You have high
Yeah,
standards.
exactly. And it's just been too long. But
Oh yeah, boy. Oh yeah, boy. Oh yeah, boy.
Oh yeah, boy.